So today I want to talk about the 5 disciplines that you need to master the knowledge from least important to most important, plus the 3 things you must have if you want to complete the knowledge successfully and quickly, and the 2 principles that you need to concentrate on when you very first start, which is start this with the attitude that you are going to succeed. The other thing is try to succeed as fast as you physically can and aim to somewhere in the region of 2 years. Let's get started. Out of the 5 disciplines that you need to master, one of them is bike work. But bike work is the least most important thing that you do. You must never do bike work instead of any of the other 4 things that I'm going to tell you. Bike work gets done because you have the time and space to do it. It doesn't get done and sacrifice one of the other things. It's very important to realize. It is the least most important thing that you do. Always remember that you're training yourself to sit in a chair in front of an examiner and answer questions verbally. The bike work doesn't help you with that. The bike work is the collecting of information. So we're going to presume that you've collected a lot of information anyway. And a lot of people are out on their bike all the time. Taxi drivers are out in their taxis all the time. Their knowledge doesn't improve in terms of their ability to pass these exams. They can do their job and they've learned how to be a taxi driver, but they can't pass the exams. Passing exams involves other aspects that are far more important than going out on your bike. So disregarding Blue Book, which is when you did go out on your bike and you got your Blue Book runs done, and also the fact that you've been out pointing and you've pointed as many points as you can, and you're going to continue pointing until the very end of the knowledge. You will never know everything. You just have to keep going and you keep pointing and accumulating more and more points as you go. But going out on your bike is the least most important thing that you do. The 4th most important thing that you do is call Blue Book. Calling the Blue Book is your language. It's your fluency. You have to be as fluent as you possibly can. And generally the rule of thumb would be that you should be able to call 40 runs in 30 minutes. And you should be doing that twice a day. You should be calling 80 runs. And that will give you speed of thought, accuracy and fluency when you're calling runs. It will give you the ability to know that everything you're calling in your Blue Book runs is a working turning, that the combination of roads that you call are correct. So we call the Blue Book not because it's given us preset lines, but because it's given us stuff that works. Now then people overkill it and they start calling bankers and football runs and everything else. You're supposed to be able to deduct and deduce what the answers would be to those. So calling those is kind of a waste of time to a degree. You're hoping you get asked those specific questions when you would be better off making sure you have the deduction skills of being able to answer point to point regardless of what the question was. So first bike work, then Blue Book. 3rd, we have points. Learning, revising, collecting points. And there are many things here that people get caught up in. A thing to remember about points is when you go for an appearance, if you don't know the point, you lose 1 point. It's not a great deal. If you muck up the run, you lose 10 points. So you've got more emphasis on getting the run remotely correct than on the fact of knowing the point. Some appearances, you are going to get asked a hell of a lot of points that you don't know. And on those appearances, the 16, 17, 18, 20 points that you got asked that you didn't know, there's pretty much nothing that you could have done about it. You couldn't have predicted it, you couldn't have preempted it, and you couldn't have studied for it. You were not going to score on that day. Those points are probably not going to come out that often again. You couldn't know what they was going to be, and you can't preempt them for the future. The examiners are always going to ask new sets of points that you can't predict. But what you can do is see which ones they're asking the most, make sure you know all of those, and then try to increase your repertoire as you continuously go through the knowledge. So it's all about statistics. You've got to make sure you know everything that they're asking the most and then build up upon that. Then the detail. So very often when people are collecting points, you collect a lot of detail. I see it all the time. First left, first right, and a turnaround. You as beginners are doing that for points that you have no comprehension of whether they need it or not. So when you collect a turnaround for a point and you've never seen it asked in a question, you're trying to predict if they asked it. And that's a waste of time and energy because on the point sheet is what they ask. And if you're practicing that point sheet, you are seeing what they ask and you can now practice what the answer could be for that specific question. Again, if you're trying to predict what they'll ask and preempt what they'll ask, certainly as a beginner, you're wasting your time because there's already plenty that they are asking that you should be finding and learning. When you write down a turnaround with no idea of its need, it's very difficult to learn and remember. Also, when you write down first left, first right, can you leave on the left? Can you set on the right? Very often beginners don't even understand what can and can't be left on the left or the right. So for example, zebra crossings, you'll very often hear a beginner think that they have to turn around a point because it's blocked by a zebra crossing. Zebra crossings can't be stopped on. It's illegal to stop on a zebra crossing. So that doesn't concern you when you're setting it down. You will be setting down off of the zebra crossing. So you can disregard zebra crossings as if they're not there. Keep left bollards or keep left islands, they can be disregarded because they're written in the rules that are produced by the examiners of things that we can say are not needed to be turned around on, because people are getting overzealous and turning around everything. There is no such thing as the concept of something being too close to a set of lights. And bear this in mind, when you get to a set of lights, especially if it's a set of lights that have got a place for people to cross, that crossing is separated by stud marks. Those stud marks can't be stopped in. So again, where they are is a point that can't be stopped in. You will be stopping away from that. So a point can't be too close or too far from a set of lights. It's non-existent. The other thing can be railings. Railings are in front of the point. We can't take that into account. It's unnecessary. You're going to be setting down in real life as close as you possibly can to that point, but the railings doesn't prevent you from saying set down on left or on the right whenever you're approaching it. There are much more aspects to this, but the thing would be this as well. When we get to note taking, too many of you take too many notes, and if anything, pretty much take no notes at all unless the point is amazingly blocked by 4 or 5 roads. I might write a small run out to get in and out of that and practice it for a few days. But other than that, every single note that you take already exists in a format that is clearer than the format that you're writing it in now. You could check the streets, the point's location on Google and see it physically to see if it's blocked by anything or where it lies in a particular street. So you can see where it is first left or first right. When you're using WizRadius app, you can see the point placed on the map as well. You can also look at the map and see the names of the streets and then try to remember roughly where you think the point was located. But the main thing is, most of the information, you don't know if you've naturally remembered it anyway. And the way to find that out is with point to point. When you do point to point, you will find out what it is that you do and don't know, and you can approach and attack that particular aspect. And when you attack a question, knowing what you need, it's much easier to learn than when you go out and collect information based on no idea of whether it's ever going to be needed. So keep your notes to a minimum, and at best, don't take any, because it is a complete waste of time and it's a distraction from the one key part about points that is important, which is the revision of them. Where is the point? What is the name of the road that the point is in? Because if you're unable to say the name of the road that the point is in, then you're nowhere. You have nothing. And every other piece of information that you gathered for that point is useless to you. Now, the next thing is when you start doing the point sheet, you get the opportunity to practice that point and you can see what you do and don't know. So we have bike work, the least most important thing that you do. Calling your blue book. Make sure you call your blue book because it's your fluency and your language, and then revise your points. And then you have the most important thing that you do, bar one other thing. Point to point. Practicing point to point. I ask people very often, how much point to point you do a day? And they say, I do the whole sheet. And by the whole sheet, they meant they'd done the questions on 56s that day or 28s that day. And there might have been only 8 or 12 questions on 56s. And quite frankly, that is nowhere near a serious volume of point to point. Or the level of the question is irrelevant. If I'm practicing questions, I will practice for a time and I will practice for an amount. And if you want to start off on the level you're on, by all means do that. But in a 3-hour session, which is roughly what you should be doing, you should be doing 3 hours point to point a day, 15 hours a week. And on those sessions, they should be broken into 15-minute sets. So you would call over 15 minutes, your partner would call over 15 minutes, and you'd do that 4 times for 1 hour, and you'd have a quick break. You'd do that 3 times. You'd have 3 hours worth of 15-minute sets. And in each 15-minute set, you need to be aware of how many runs did you call. If you're calling 3, you're calling 1 run every 5 minutes. And that is no good. It's no good for several reasons. You're going to have about 15 minutes in an appearance, and they're going to ask you at least 4 questions, and it's going to be a much more higher pressure circumstances. You've got to be able to control your stress within an appearance so that you're able to answer those 4 questions. That in itself is going to be difficult. But when you're at home practicing, you are going to learn far faster by the mistakes you make, if you can make them quick enough. So it isn't about making a run from A to B accurate on the first go. It's about giving the first go that you do for that particular run a quick stab. Just guess. Guess at what you think the answer would be. Once you've guessed, you can check it quickly. You can see what mistakes you've made, and then you can rerun it again. That's going to get you through the volume, because the secret to point and the absolute secret to the knowledge is the volume of point to point that you do. Not the quality of one run, because you're hoping that you get asked that one run and you're not going to. The combinations of runs you can be asked is phenomenal. So you want to be mediocre at as many runs as you possibly can. So when you're doing your point to point, the analogy we use is basically treat it like playing darts. If you want to learn to play darts, throw thousands of darts. Just keep throwing them. The more darts you throw, the more accurate you become. It doesn't matter how long you stand there and aim. You're still going to be rubbish if you stand there and aim for 20 minutes. You may as well just run the run as quickly as you possibly can to see what it is that gives you problems with that run. Your sense of direction may be completely in the opposite direction, but you needed to learn that. So stop the thinking deeply as a beginner and get on with the answer. The final thing is you must find time to relax. So that involves having a good study program. Set aside all of the times that you want to study the things you need to study. So for example, you're going to do 1 hour blue book a day. Best time to do that is very first thing in the morning. Get up, get that done. Half hour, small break, half hour, done. The next thing is your point to point. Point to point involves mental energy. And if you do this last thing in the day, it's going to be the worst time to do it. So you do that after you've warmed up with Blue Book. You should be doing about 3 hours point to point. Broken into 1 hour sets, have a break, 1 hour, have a break. And in that time, you need to be aware of how many runs you called. It should be in the region of 50 to 80 runs, 25 each to 40 each between you and a partner. If you're not doing that kind of volume, that becomes your target. It is all about the volume of runs that you do, and you will see the runs reoccur in a few days' time, and you can remember the answers you gave previously, and you're now able to answer quicker and more accurately to previous answers you've heard. The fewer questions you practice, the less the questions will reoccur and the less you can remember, because it took so long for the question to reoccur that you've forgotten the answer anyway. So it's all about volume. So there's your 3 hours point to point. You'd also want to try to set aside an hour's point revision. And in the point revision, the mistake that's made here is you're generally revising long lists of points that you already know. This is why the sticky list is so important. The sticky list is the points that you keep making mistakes on, the ones that you're weak on. The ones you don't know, you can't do anything about other than go and visit. So that'll involve making a bike list and going out and visit them. But the ones you do know, if you're revising where Buckingham Palace is and there's 1,000 of these points that are in the same caliber of Buckingham Palace, then you're wasting your time. You should be revising as many sticky points, as many weaknesses as possible. The points that you know go in your long-term memory. The runs that you do, the Blue Book runs that you revise, don't go in your long-term memory. They're only going to be there for as long as you keep using them. So no matter how familiar you think you are with the runs, just keep calling them. That's your fluency. But the points, you don't need to continuously revise points you already know. If you know the point, scrap it from your list of things that you revise and keep the number low. So create a good study regime. 1 hour Blue Book, 3 hours point to point, 1 hour points revision. And then outside that, whenever you can, create a bike list and find time to go out and visit your points. The mistake made with bike lists is you seem to see a lot of people doing bike lists based on postcodes. It is the weakest way to do it. It should be based on geography, and you should be creating horseshoes and boomerangs to travel out and travel back, visiting points on your way out and visiting points on your way back, and maybe arriving at a cluster of points and clearing up that clustered area. That's how you should be doing your points. We can go in depth about all of these 5 subjects, but the main thing is this. Bike work is your least most important thing that you do. Do not do it instead of calling your Blue Book, revising your points, and doing point to point. And find time to rest by making a good study regime that you stick to. Always set times of what you're going to start from and finish so that you know that that study aspect is done. Don't overstudy. It is no good for you. Find time to rest. And they're my 5 things. Hope that's of some help. If you have any queries or questions and you want to ask me about them, just send me an email, dean@wizann.co.uk, and I'll answer any questions you may have. Good luck. Thank you for watching our video today. If you could subscribe, like, share or comment, that would be great. If you want to email me, do so at dean@wizann.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter @WizAnn and follow us on Facebook, WizAnn Knowledge.